Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of VR Download, a twice weekly show recorded here in the Upload Virtual Studios. I'm your host, Kyle, and with me today, over here in the other hot seat.
Hello, Ian Hamilton here with our custom hands. I always have to do the demonstration of the hand tracking getting better. Looking great.
Very cool. Yeah, absolutely. The hand tracking, it really helps because I'm a very emotive person, and I think Ian, you are too. Just being able to do this and make fingers and stuff. It's just really it's really immersive. I mean, I hate to overuse the word immersive, but it really is. I mean, that sense of presence is really here. So we're gonna have a fun show today. Lots of fun hardware announcements to talk about, and a couple other things. If you are watching this on YouTube right now, then you can join in on the fun in the chat, and we can actually see who's in the chat here on our lovely little pads that are yet to be named. So far, Dustin and Ryan, hello to the two of you who have said hi in the chat so far, and we'll keep an eye out on further discussion going on. So, Ian, are you ready to get into the news?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right, great. We always like to keep our finger on the pulse of technology, and Apple wants to put technology on your finger. So, Apple patent reveals rumored finger rings VR controller. An Apple patent filed may reveal work on the input device for the company's upcoming VR MR headset. Now, I have to say, the whole idea of a ring controller, it's been there before. We've seen this sort of thing. I think I actually have one on a shelf over here from I don't know what company it was, a little Bluetooth ring, and you can move stuff around on Android with it, use it like a mouse. I don't know, Ian. What do you think about this type of technology?
Yeah, I have yet to try a ring myself. I haven't tried one of those. There's the Finch ring that was just announced, which was from a company that you need to put an armband on for 6-DoF tracking with the sort of ring solution. Um, Obviously, there's very clear issues to deal with when you've got that sort of input device. The question we always come back to with Apple is, are they going to do gaming? And I don't know if they're going to do gaming. You still might get nice haptics if you have something around the tip of your finger, but this patent doesn't show that. It shows it obviously as a ring. That's why we were thinking when we heard the various reports out there saying a thimble-like device, we kind of imagined that there was something on the end of the finger. And uh, now we see this ring thing in this patents, and this is kind of a classic Heaney headline where we really have to ask, how real is this? Is this just another patent idea from Apple, or is this actually indicating what the final product's going to look like? And we don't know. Um, and hi, I
Yeah,
just want
we
to say hi, Mr. Man, and hi, Willito.
Yes, hello. The idea of the thimble was something that had been talked about for quite a while now. I personally have been, I don't want to say preaching this for years, but I would be willing to wear gloves or some sort of hand apparatus to be able to be tracked, my hands to be tracked better for whatever devices. And I've seen early prototypes of hand tracking where there's gloves, and each part of each digit has a different color, so it's more differentiated and it can do more tracking. And I guess from an AI learning type of thing, they could train. I mean, obviously, this finger tracking didn't just come out of nowhere. I mean, they trained it to do this. But when you've got stuff like this with rings, uh, I wonder what type of capabilities this type of input would have. And you mentioned gaming. I how many games do you do this with
Yep.
your hand? I don't know, but I mean, I feel like if Apple's coming out with a device to compete with what I have on my head right now, Quest 2 or anywhere close, gaming's kind of a given, isn't it?
I don't doubt it. I mean, so yes, if they're competing, but that's kind of the ultimate question is whether they're going to try to compete. You've got HoloLens out there, and I was talking with Jamie today about the HoloLens since Microsoft sent us HoloLens 2 to test for their most recent mesh demonstration, and we're going to send those HoloLenses back. But we both got to kind of get a sense of what AR, the status of AR, is right now, and it's just not in the same product category use case. You know, yes, you could play an AR game, but it's going to be terrible given the current standard. And so, yes, you need something really haptically feeding back at you in order for you to have a great gaming experience and with today's hardware. And I'm not seeing it out of this stuff, but that doesn't mean that that's necessarily what Apple's going to do. Um, if you one thing I'll say though with gaming is Heaney has pointed this out to me a couple times, and it's a really valuable insight that the games we have with VR today know nothing about your environment. The games we have today in VR literally know you've got a square box and the dimensions of of that box. Now we are going over to our couches on the Oculus Quest and measuring our couch to bring our couch into VR. But that's the differentiator that Apple could bring is a really, really, really smart understanding of your environment. And we haven't seen what those types of games might look like.
With the HoloLens, you mentioned the HoloLens 1, which I very intimately connected with for quite a while there. I was developing for it for a while. And they have a game, I believe it was called Robo Raider, which basically mapped out your room and then walls would explode and then little guys would come out. And the only thing you were doing to kill them or to shoot them was click, 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 just the little
Yeah.
tap, you know. And I wonder if that's enough. I mean, gaming in and of itself doesn't necessarily mean I'm holding a gun or I'm punching stuff and things like that. I mean, solitaire is essentially a game. Minesweeper is a game. Uh, Gaming in and of itself, yeah, it's just loosely defined. Yes.
Yeah, I mean, imagine a ghost. You know, your house is suddenly haunted, right? Your
Yeah.
your your house is haunted. Like you're interacting, you're running from a ghost. Phasmophobia with your real house. I mean, those are the types of games you could have. Or if these rings provide really good tracking, maybe every surface becomes an interactable interface. And so it's not just about touching windows in midair. It's actually touching screens on a wall that feel as responsive as Apple's touchscreens. Then you've
Hmm.
got real interfaces everywhere you look. Then it gets more interesting than simply these weird floating menus you've got with current AR. DJ is answering the question about these avatars. It's why I kind of start off this. I think we need to start off each show, Kyle, kind of explaining our studio because we get the
Hmm.
questions every single week. The
We do.
studio is made custom in house by David Heaney. We're using Oculus Quest right now with Oculus avatars. This is Facebook's hand tracking system, but he's using a customized version of Facebook's hand tracking that allows us to show hand tracking values that aren't very high quality. So basically, the headset tries to figure out what your hands are doing at any given moment, and any apps that are in the actual Oculus App Store can only show your hands when it's at the very highest value. Well, Kenya is showing actually low value versions of the hand tracking, but he is also filtering it with his own smart filtering so that our hands don't fly off in weird directions. And it's ending up being really expressive while also not being it's good for you guys to look at it. It looks nice, it's nice for us to gesture to each other.
Yeah, and there's no eye tracking at all. It's simply the little motor motions that occur just from the avatar's general stuff. So it is really neat though. It is nice to see. Like I feel like I'm sitting here next to Ian, even though he's probably, 1,500 miles away from me. So it's kind of cool. Pretty cool. Do we have any more that we want to talk about with two rings to rule them all here from Apple?
I think we'll just keep an eye on Apple. Of course, we're not going to find out what they're actually going to do unless there's a massive leak or those products actually get released. You know, Apple puts everyone under NDA. There was, of course, the other story this week of Apple suing a former employee
Yeah.
over
Oh
some of
yeah.
those leaks. and Apple is serious about its secrecy.
Yeah, between all the, I guess what you should do is, if you are looking for leaks, go to all the bars around the Apple headquarters and wait for two rings to show up on one of the bar stools, and then just take them and send them to us or whoever, because that seems to be the way that leaks typically occur
Yeah,
in the technology world. It's all in bars. All right, well, let's move on then to the next piece of news. So it looks like nearly 20% of Facebook's employees are working on VR and AR. New figures suggest that nearly 20% of Facebook employees are working on virtual reality and augmented reality technologies. Now, I know that there's all sorts of statistics you're going to throw at us, Ian, here about the growth of Facebook's just overall employment numbers, and then that percentage obviously is a big part of that.
yep. Facebook's numbers have been growing like clockwork, 30% per year for the last several years. We've obviously been following VR a long time. Facebook bought Oculus in 2014. As I recall, Mark Zuckerberg went and visited a lab at Stanford University to sort of see what the state of VR was back then, and also went obviously down to Irvine, where Facebook or where Oculus was headquartered, and then made that decision to have the Oculus founders over and make that purchase happen. And as we recall, it wasn't just the Oculus purchase that happened in 2014. They also hired away from Valve, Michael Abrash, and some of the other architects of Valve's VR technology. And Michael Abrash obviously heads the research division at Oculus or at Facebook, where they're pursuing the really long term hard problems that we got into earlier in this discussion, like haptic gloves. Michael Abrash himself at some of the Oculus Connects has said things like, the moment that you actually feel haptic hands, when you reach out and grab a cup and that isn't actually there, and you feel it pushing back against you exactly as you will, it's going to be a profoundly moving, earth shattering moment for your brain when you actually feel that for the first time. And those are the types of things that Facebook's research division is working on. And that's hundreds, if not thousands, of employees just working on the future, not even to talk about the Quest 2s we're wearing on our heads and the Quest 3s and 4s that we know that are in production or, in process of getting towards production. And then we go to the numbers, right? If they're growing by 30% per year, it's absurd. The turnover, the fact that every 6 months you've got an entirely new team that's maybe twice as large as it used to be. You're constantly shifting to new priorities, and there's always new people around you. So it's got to be insane to work at Facebook and kind of have to deal with this constantly shifting landscape. All right, so the number we had previously was in 2017, we had about, I think it was it 10,000 people working at Facebook? No, 20,000, I think. 20,000 people working at Facebook in 2017. Now that number is up north of 50,000. And that's just between 2017 and 2021. That's how many people they're sweeping up and hiring just because of this 30% annual growth. It's insane how much bigger it's getting. And back then it was only 5% or so of the employees were working in VR. Now, when you cut it out and there's 10,000 people working on VR and AR, that's nearly 20% of the workforce there, and it's just an absurd. I don't expect it to end anytime soon. That's the other thing, the other part of this. I would be really surprised if Facebook suddenly said, we're going to take it easy for a while. We don't need to grow by 30% this year.
So I have a couple things I want to throw out there. Number one, yes, not only is it a bigger number, or a bigger percentage of the total number, it's a bigger total number. So that is, exponential growth and all of that. But we have FRL's little logo up here, and we're talking about that. And FRL, Facebook Reality Labs, is I don't know, 5 minutes up the road from my house. And there's no way 10,000 people are working at that specific location. So what you, and plus with, the coronavirus and all of that stuff and people working from home, I have a feeling there's a lot of people who are working on VR, but it's all in the software side of things and stuff like, I mean, I don't know, I'm speculating here just
Mm.
based on the current situation, but you didn't cram 10,000 or even a couple thousand more people into FRL in Redmond, Washington, and maybe you have another location somewhere in, California, but I don't know. I wonder what everybody really is working on. So how do they
Well,
define working on VR AR? Is that simply testing? Is that QA? Is that coding? Is it working on the big things? Or do people have machines at their home where they're, cutting out new Fresnel lens shapes and things like that? We don't really know much about this other than these rough numbers.
a couple things going on there with that. So you're living up in Seattle,
Mm-hmm.
where Facebook Reality Labs research division is headquartered, and that is where Michael Abrash is from, more or less. When he came on board, I'm guessing the conversation went something like Abrash saying, "This is what I need in order to really solve these giant problems," and Mark Zuckerberg said, "You can have it." And what that meant for him as an individual, I'm guessing, is he didn't want to be away from his family. He didn't want to relocate. And so they
Mm-hmm.
put the headquarters near him. And he's been building teams that are working on the very long, long problems. Those are his teams up in that area. Now, what's sort of come, it's not just one example of that. I think Facebook has done this again and again in a couple situations where they need to get literally the world's best person on a specific problem that they want to solve. And so there's various satellite offices in places all around the world that are solving very specific issues. And it's literally because there's a couple brains there that didn't want to move. And
Mm-hmm.
uh, that they've set up those satellite offices to solve those very big problems. One of those is the codec avatars. They have an office that's trying to come up with hyper realistic. We were using the most cartoony avatars on Earth right now, but they're working on ones that can take you from a photograph of yourself that's on Facebook over to a hyper realistic, when your face twitches in real life, your avatar twitches exactly like your face twitches. And they're working on that. That's one of those 10-year projects that they've got going on at Facebook. Now, as far as like offices and that sort of thing, I thought it was interesting a couple months ago when Andrew Bosworth, I think he said something to the effect of going back to the office for something in the middle of this pandemic. There are certain things you have to be in the office to do, and that's assess hardware and the
Mm-hmm.
status of new hardware. Yeah, they could maybe ship it to your home, but do you really want to trust FedEx with the boxes of
Or the U.S.
hardware
Postal
that's not going
Service.
to ship for 5 years?
Right.
So, yeah, as far as how they assess it, Andrew Bosworth is, as I understand it, in charge of this whole giant division at Facebook, and there's lots of people now. Maybe the numbers are odd because yeah, there's people working on, I'm sure, Messenger in VR, other Facebook products, bringing them into VR. But that is how. Yeah, James is bringing up the counting question. How is this number counted? The source on this is the information. The information said that they estimated that it was around 10,000 working on AR and VR, and uh, it's hard to say because we don't know. That's our only source in this. How they counted it, maybe they overcounted, undercounted it, but I don't think so. I think it's literally that's how big of an issue it is, or how big this investment is at Facebook. And the article that we wrote, Heaney, if you could drop it into the comments, I'm pretty proud of this article, to be perfectly honest, because we've been following these numbers, and it's not just this employee number that we need to assess by. If you hold up the number of employees next to the amount of revenue that Facebook's actually getting out of AR and VR, you start to understand how forward thinking they are. 97% of Facebook's revenue comes from ads. That means 3% of Facebook's revenue comes from things other than ads. And as of last quarter, the December quarter, Christmas, when all of these VR developers had their biggest record day of sales ever for their VR games, Facebook saw a giant boost to its revenue numbers from non-ads. So Quest 2 contributed a huge amount of growth to that 3% of Facebook's overall revenue. Yet, they're devoting 20% of their workforce to this idea that's only making up 3% of their revenue. When you put all those numbers together, you start to understand just how far ahead Facebook's thinking. I remember when Apple came out with the original iPhone, it was either the iPhone or the iPad. Steve Jobs said something to the effect of, "We think we're 5 years ahead of the competition. This is 5 years ahead of what anybody else has." And I think when you go back and look at how the iPhone turned out, and what Android had to do to catch up to where iPhone was at that moment, it was something like 5 years. And I think that's what Quest is. Quest 2 is starting to build out a multi-year lead on some of these standalone all-in-one products, and the employee numbers kind of reinforce that.
So, I mean, I guess essentially it's a good thing that they're doing this. And obviously, VR is the 3%. 3% of however many millions of dollars that they made. That's no small number. So I would imagine that if they can continue that, especially with social media being so funky right now, a lot of people are either leaving or choosing to do less on it. It's I guess it's forward thinking for them, or at least it was back in 2014 when they decided to buy this cash cow, and now they're just milking it for all they can.
That's not a cash cow yet. That's the irony of it. It's like this is them working ahead towards a cash cow, and I'm gonna disagree. That I'm gonna throw something out there and say, I don't like labeling these things as good or bad. It's kind of like up for history to decide whether it's good or bad. Keep in mind that Facebook changes people's lives in really, really, really significant ways. When you get an offer from Facebook, it could be 2 times your expected salary, right? So it's almost like Facebook is going around making people offers they can't refuse, and then you go work at Facebook, and there's that famous old phrase of golden handcuffs, right? Where yes, you're paid an enormous amount of money, but you're also under an NDA that you can't release the information you're talking about. And so if you try to make a moral decision inside this giant behemoth of a company, who can you talk to, and what kind of effect can you actually have to shift the direction if bad decisions get made? So I hate. Yes, I respect the investment, and from that point that, like, where would VR be without this investment in VR? Yeah, it's a significant thing to consider, but I hate to say it's good, because history is going to be the judge of whether Facebook was a good steward with our personal information and really did, polarize people. Those are things that we're not going to find out until the 2030s or 2040s.
Mm-hmm. And it looks like the chat is talking about the the head start, I guess, that Facebook has as a result of getting into all of this. Yeah, it's pretty interesting. So, are we done talking about Oculus now? Should we move on to a different company? Let's do that.
Yep.
All right. So Pico announces investment round and plans for the Neo 3 in 2021. Pico Interactive raised $37.5 million from investors and says it's developing the Neo 3 headset for release in 2021. Well, we're in 2021. Q2, Q3, Q4. Are they going to
Yeah.
invent a Q5? I don't know. So what do we know about this new headset, Ian?
Yeah, all they said was that it's a variation of the Neo 2. They obviously got the two versions of the Neo 2, which is one is just the regular headset with both headsets have their tracking technology, which is uh, robust, and you can hold your hands behind your back and still have the controller track pretty accurately. That's a very specific type of tracking technology. It's electromagnetic. It's not dependent on the headset seeing where the headset is. So they've only got the tracking cameras on there for your head. It has no connection to the tracking of the controllers. It's pretty cool that it works, and it works pretty well. I'm guessing it's going to be a faster chip. It'll use a faster chip, newer chip, and it'll be another step forward. It's Pico is the only company besides maybe the HTC and its the Vive Focus to be working on standalones. All these people talking about the 2-year lead or potentially maybe it feeling like a bigger league for Facebook. You can actually feel it by putting a Pico on your head and trying it out without eye adjustment. I don't believe there's any. You can't adjust the lenses on those headsets, and you start seeing all the things: software, content ecosystem, all the things that need to get better for any competitor to get close to what Facebook's doing. And Pico and HTC are the only ones doing it. And one of the reasons I think is because both of them are Asian focused companies, and that's where Facebook's kind of refusing to do business. They'll get their products made over there, but they won't actually release their products over there.
So you said something interesting, and a lot of people are talking about in the chat about the standalone is definitely the way you want to go. Pico doesn't need to beat the Quest 1 or the Quest 2. It needs to be on par with it, or maybe offer one or two little pieces that make it a little bit different. But as it stands right now, I would be even okay with something coming out from another company that is just maybe on par with the Quest 1, and then have that be out there for people to as an option, and then let Oculus have the Quest 2 as kind of the dominator in the market for right now, and then have something else come out from them, and then everything kind of catches up to Quest 2. Does that make sense that we have that like tiered approach to it?
No, I definitely get that. Both HTC and Pico are directing their products toward the business market, and
that's a whole nother topic. Yeah.
I think the issue is that no one can compete with Facebook on price. And as we covered last week, Heaney and I dived into those comments from Zuckerberg. Facebook's going to lead on price for the foreseeable future, and I don't know that anyone can catch them up. I think you were closer with the first comment that like products that are focused in an entirely different way than what Facebook is doing might be the way to win in some of these products. I put out this question on Facebook, and Anton Hand shut me down and said the way that you compete with Facebook is by creating better software that isn't garbage, I think is what he said. And so if when you try a Pico or you try a Vive, you can kind of feel that they're doing a decent job with software, but it's nowhere near the level of polish that Facebook is applying. And I think you're going to need a company of Apple or Google's stature to compete with compelling software.
So you got two things there I want to touch on. Number one, the fact that it's enterprise. Enterprise, to me, that word, while it means okay for B2B and all the other stuff that they usually say, but to me, when a company says we're focusing on enterprise, it feels like to me that they know that their product will not have mainstream appeal. And you can be mad at me for saying that, but when I hear that word, especially in the VR industry, I immediately think, well, you know that your product will have some appeal, but not mainstream appeal, or it won't be able to do the things that the mainstream appeal headsets can do. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's just a very strict differentiator between what the folks, I mean, if you're watching this show right now, you're either a avid VR enthusiast, a gamer, you're excited about new technology, or there's a very small group of you who are business minded and are looking for the next business venture. So when we say enterprise, you go, ooh, that sounds like fun. But it really is almost two completely different audiences for the enterprise versus like mainstream consumer stuff.
It's
Yeah.
well, it's interesting you bring that up. I guess it's the, if you're an enterprise looking for a product, you only have X, Y, and Z choices, right? If you need to train 10,000 employees how to do something efficiently, you could go get 200 headsets or 100 headsets from a company and train all your employees in VR using that product. And it really boils down to price on one hand, but also, do you see Facebook as a competitor? If you see Facebook as a competitor to whatever you're doing in whatever industry, then that Facebook option, it doesn't work for you. You've got to go get options Y or Z. And that's, I think, how these decisions get made at a lot of these companies on whether they're, for their business use case, what kind of VR headset they're going to use. I want to talk about some of the comments. Daniel talking about the Shadow news. So I think that's in reference to Facebook announcing that cloud VR streaming applications have to that they have to be sideloaded. You have to use your PC and sideload them onto your Quest. You cannot put cloud VR applications on App Lab or on the Oculus Store. You can obviously still get virtual desktop and maybe use that how you please. So that's not a problem. And anyone else that's building those types of applications that require you to have physical access to a PC in order for it to stream between the headset, Facebook has more or less said, we believe that's above the quality bar, and people who are doing that understand what they're getting into, and everyone else, we're drawing the line at cloud-based VR. And so that means companies like Shadow and Pluto are going to have to offer their cloud streaming options where you stream from a server out there to your headset, VR content like maybe Half-Life Alyx, with quite a bit of added latency between the server and your headset. You're going to have to sideload that to do that. And Facebook itself has said that's 5 years away, and I think that's a pretty good estimate. I think it's at least 5 years away for you to have really good cloud streaming, if not much longer than that.
Yeah, the whole idea of cloud streaming, I think it's an inevitability. I just think that it's not quite ready for prime time. Like, just not quite yet. So they should just keep it in enterprise for a while.
And people talking about Stadia. David on staff is the biggest Stadia stooge. Just can't shut up about how good Stadia is. I hope you're watching, David. Yeah, but it's quite a big difference to stream a game to a flat screen on the other side of the room, and to stream a sickening experience to VR. You need really good content. Wow, Big Show, thank you for the donation.
Oh yeah, wow, thank you so much. That's fantastic. We appreciate that.
Big Show wrote, love the show. I watched Ready Player One again today. Man, I can't wait. With Starlink, which I have, VR streaming will be good. So you have Starlink. Feel how you feel Facebook, but they are doing so much more than anyone. Keep up the good work, and that's really, they are doing more than anyone at this stage. Sony and Apple, we think they might actually be investing at the same level or at a similar levels to Facebook, but they're not releasing at the same product cadence. So we don't see those. Obviously, we don't even see an Apple product yet for VR, AR, and Sony is only doing it every couple of years. And yeah, I can't wait. I want to get Denny. I was talking to Denny. I want to get someone who's on Starlink into this show so we can see what Starlink latency is like. for our avatars at least.
Yeah, big show. Thank you again. Also, he says, also, I cloud stream all the time. No lag, no issue. Playing 4K at 60. When Starlink gets to everyone, then streaming won't be an issue. And you know what? I agree. I think that once it's around everywhere. Now, a couple people are saying that Din Don Master 5, I'm already cloud streaming from my PC, probably thanks to virtual desktop, VR desktop, Gee's nice, quaint little app that I'm sure some of you are aware of. It's almost a must have at this point. I think that there's a lot of technologies that are still kind of baking. Oh, Ian, you did mention about Sony iterating without it actually being released. Now, you've been around long enough, Ian, and some people who are in the chat probably remember this too, that Project Morpheus, as they originally called it, iterated 20 or 30 times before they released the PSVR. So just because you don't see a product come out doesn't mean it's being worked on.
Yeah. And I love the people saying, we kind of hear all these people talking about streaming every week. If you feel comfortable with your streaming and you know what kind of latency you're going to get and you're actually okay with that, you don't get sick, you don't get a headache, there shouldn't be anyone sort of standing in your way, stopping you from doing what you want to do. And we totally understand that kind of mentality. The flip side is always like those people aren't necessarily the majority or representative of what the average consumer. Most people have Cox Communications boxes that aren't even managed by themselves. They have no idea what latency means. They have no way to get inside the box and tweak settings and make it all better. And that's the average consumer that Facebook and these other companies are aiming for, not the person who knows how to squeeze every last millisecond of latency out of their server setup.
Yeah. Well, latency, bandwidth, those are all important words nowadays until we get it down to sub-millisecond, which is almost impossible. But you never know. Never know. What nothing is impossible in the technology world, which is what keeps me interested in it. All right, let's move on to the next piece of news. Let's talk about some HTC stuff. It looks like new HTC Vive Tracker is 15% lighter and 30% more expensive. So 15% lighter and 30% more expensive. A new HTC Vive Tracker on sale this month is lighter with better battery life while priced at $129.99. That's US dollars. I don't know, $130 for a Vive Tracker, which, I mean, having just one isn't really going to do you much good. You need, I don't know what, 5 at least, I think, minimum for body tracking.
Well, 3? You've got the hands. So if you've got your hands with the controllers,
right,
and then you've got your head with the headset,
right.
And so you want one on your hips and you want one on your feet, and you can do a pretty good job with that. Yeah, it'll probably get better if you've got more. But yeah, 3 is kind of, I think, the bare minimum for full body, and then you can do better with more. Then you've got to deal with USB issues because you're plugging in all the multiple dongles into your computer in order to talk to all these different devices. I've used the trackers over the years. They're really, really cool. And I've been sitting here with wondering, like, okay, I've got an Index. Index is a super comfortable headset. I love running it up to 120, even 144. In our earliest days of this show, Heaney had worked out a way for me to put on the Index, to come into the studio with the Index controllers, and for me to be in here via an Index. And I keep thinking, should I go and buy 3 trackers? And should I go get the facial tracker from HTC and try plugging it into the Index? And should I, it's kind of hard case to make to Heaney out there, our developer, that this one person here wants full body tracking and you need to redo your entire tech stack so that I can have a full body avatar in VR with face tracking and with arms and legs. It's just the expense is so off the charts compared to like the number of people who are actually going to do it. It doesn't make sense to go down that route and spend all that money to develop for these things.
Ian, you are right now the voice of every developer who has been asked that question. Are you going to support this hardware? Are you going to support it? Because there's 3 people who want it, and you're going to spend hundreds of hours to do it. I love that. That is just a beautiful thing. It's a challenge. You know, you need to have mainstream support, and then mainstream appeal, and it's kind of a catch-22. You either do it to make it popular, or you wait until it's popular before you do it. Oh man, that's just a rough way to go. I mean, the trackers themselves, I'm very happy to hear that they are smaller, lighter. I don't know if they're faster at all, but I think they function at like 60 hertz. So I mean, how much more faster do you really need it to be? What I'm trying to figure out though is who is the target audience for this item.
I like Daniel's comment here. A lot of these recent products literally only appeal to YouTubers and Twitch. There's no mass appeal to spend $400 to $500 in full tracking. And it's funny because, like, yeah, the rigging up the full body avatar so you can have this very, very compelling avatar for Beat Saber. That's not a big audience to spend that much output so you can bring in more YouTube subscribers. Yeah, it's not a huge number.
Yeah, who knows? Yeah, we'll have to see how that goes. You know, the last piece of news that we have here actually goes along perfectly with this. Another HTC piece of news. HTC Vive Pro facial tracker for sale in the US this month. The tracker will be available for purchase in the United States starting March 24th for $129.99. HTC likes that number, don't they?
Mm-hmm.
So facial tracker, what I read, it can track what's like 38 different facial twitches. I don't know. It's have we tried this yet?
I have not tried it. I've got to be so I point this out in my articles. HTC said when they initially told us about the tracker that it would be latency of something like 6 milliseconds from when you actually make the facial movement to it being reflected in the software. By within something like 20 minutes after their embargo time, so they gave us a time that said, do you agree to not publish this before this time? We'll give you more info. We say, okay, we won't publish before that time. They send us some more info. The info says 6 milliseconds of latency. And we publish at the time that they told us. 20 minutes after then, they sent us an email saying, oh, it's actually less than 10 milliseconds of latency. Oh, well, we've already put on. I went and updated the article and put their new number in there. But here, if you go look at the marketing that they have for this thing, it says near zero latency. Actually, in their public-facing marketing on the sales page for this thing. So there's 3 different numbers out there that they're giving people to indicate how good this is at tracking your facial movements, and I'm sure it's decent, but again, we come back to this situation where doing this better and at mass market is going to require machine learning algorithms and teams that are just improving this constantly.
Now, I'm going to ask you a question, Ian, and this is just me trying to be objective here and trying to be fair. Near zero, I mean, 10 milliseconds in the grand scheme of how time works is near zero.
Oh, sure. So is 1 second is technically near zero if you compare it on the scale of a billion years.
Absolutely. Good. So my question to you is, how fast does it have to be? What does the latency have to be for lip tracking and facial tracking before it becomes noticeably off? And I would say that 10 milliseconds is probably decent. I mean, maybe even 17 milliseconds might be decent for facial tracking. I don't know. We don't really know what the exact perfect number to hit would be before you would break immersion.
Well, so I think that's why I kind of started off this little segment of our discussion by saying there's also the HP Omnicept edition on the way, where we are one of the few applications out there today actually meeting on a regular basis in VR, and we have our developer out there, Heaney, improving the studio week to week. And we do notice differences in latency between our lips moving and the lip sync that's there, and how good he's syncing it up. If you go back to our early shows, I don't think I can watch our early shows anymore because of how mismatched everything was. And he's getting that much better at doing all these things. But it's why I want the lip tracker to come in here and really measurably how much better does it make it, the lip sync and all those things. And I'm not convinced. It would take an extraordinary amount of time for us to kind of like prove whether or not it's a massive improvement or not. But we do want to get there. We do want to have faces in VR. It's just call me very, very, very skeptical that
Okay, you're very,
I
very,
could put
very
that thing on
skeptical.
my face and make it better.
Oh wow, look at that.
Yeah, this is Neo S, and that's one of the things that has the integration, because I think they had early access to some of this hardware. And it looks,
It's pretty solid to me.
would that be would the studio look a lot better with that in it? Probably, but I don't know.
It's like
It would
Walmart Vision. I love that.
I hate the glitches. Any glitches are really disorienting, and I think that's one of the things that Heaney his philosophy is winning me over more and more and more when we actually experience this week to week to week. The way he focuses in on, he talks about baby avatars and how Apple has these like baby looking avatars. If you go look at the kind of avatars they have for the Animoji, Memoji in their apps, and it's off-putting to kind of have these babies sometimes making serious discussions. We have very serious discussions in here about technology and the way it's used, and there's this philosophy that's why we don't have arms. What you only show what you're sure of, because if you show things that you're not sure of and you get it wrong, it activates that uncanny valley part of your brain and makes you feel uncomfortable and weird.
Well, and I think that's where AI will step in and get rid of those glitches. I mean, obviously, nobody's lip, it doesn't have, like weird glitchy stuff. They can get rid of that with good software, but it needs to develop, just like with the hands. I mean, our hands used to like go all wonky all the time, and now they're pretty solid. I think it's all right. No, I'm looking forward to this kind of stuff. I do think it's kind of cool. I'm hoping that I don't know about that idea of having it like be a little like chin biscuit, like just like right there in front of your face.
Swap's comment here. I think Bluetooth audio is 40 milliseconds at best. Heaney, maybe correct me if I'm wrong, but can you connect Bluetooth headphones to a Quest now? Have they added that? They didn't add it for a while, didn't they? There was that latency was an issue for audio.
Okay. So latency's too high. Spatial presence is broken. Okay. Well, yeah. And Mike on here is also saying yes. And Soul Dagger, yes, but dat latency, yo, it's terrible. Yeah, it's pretty bad. All right. Well, I mean, it's one of those things where seeing new stuff like this, where facial tracking and eye tracking and all this stuff, we know that these things are coming down the pipeline. So it's good to see that people are jumping in and experimenting a little bit at first, just to see what will work and what won't. I mean, look at how many people put different types of tracking for a while when everybody was like, no, it's got to be a camera facing you or little laser boxes in the corner of your room. Now there's all sorts of different fun things going on. I think we're just seeing the beginnings of some of the obviously essential pieces of this final product that we might not get for 5 or 10 years still.
Well, keep in mind as our last show, go find our last show. Heaney maybe put a link to it, but Zuckerberg has said he wants eye tracking and face tracking in the next versions of their headsets. So I don't think it's necessarily that far off. I think Facebook has already been focused on these two specific things, eye tracking and face tracking, for a long time, and they want to get it right. As if we've done stories on some of their research going back years, where they had gauges inside the lining of the headset that when you made certain facial movements, the facial liner of the headset would recognize that you're making a certain expression. And that was not, Facebook's constantly not shipping these solutions because they can't do it at scale or affordably. And so they're trying to find that magic thing that's affordable, scalable, and works on like 100% of people.
And that's where the challenge, I think, is going to be for this new tracking stuff, is that I don't want them to release it just to check the box. Okay,
Mike,
face tracking, check.
Mike, it was a bad joke, but to be clear, Facebook is trying to figure out how to model your ears, because you actually need a model of your ears that's super accurate in order for the audio to sound exactly like it does in the real world. So they need to create an actual 3D model of your ear in order for them to create really believable audio in VR for you.
They could put cameras inside your ear, your headphones. Yeah, you just put cameras right in the earphones, and then
how many nightmares did you just cause?
Oh, plenty.
Some people aren't. Some of our viewers aren't going to be able to sleep tonight with
looking forward to the tweets. I love it. Oh man. All right. Well, hey, that's just the wonderful part of our world, is that we get to watch this technology and how it interacts with humans and society and all of that. It's just wonderful things. Ian, do we have anything else we want to talk about before we wrap this show up?
Just check it, uploadvr.com. We've got a lot of big stuff. South by Southwest is underway. There's some VR stuff going on at South by Southwest. And we'll make sure to check in later in the week. We'll have David and Jamie's gaming show on Thursday, assuming that they'll both be in there. And then we'll be back with hardware next week. And I think things are accelerating overall. So we're going to be constantly bringing all the latest news when it comes to hardware and the broader industry trends here on Monday.
Yeah, I don't know about everybody else, but I personally, I check Upload VR like a dozen times a day, because you never know what fun, amazing stuff is going to come out. So follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and subscribe to YouTube and all those fun things. Turn the little bells on, and I hate to sound like and subscribe, but yeah, like and subscribe. And Upload VR is the place to go. News, reviews, comments, and interviews every day. All right. Well, Ian, fun conversation. Thank you very much. And we'll see you all in the future. Bye now.